Okay, let's dive in. We're living in this age where information feels almost infinite, right? The internet's overflowing.
Absolutely flooded.
Yeah, and now we have generative AI churning out text constantly. So the big question is why? Why is someone like Elon Musk, arguably one of the most, well, powerful figures globally, trying to rewrite basically the entire sum of human knowledge from the ground up?
That is the multi-billion-dollar question, isn't it? And it's exactly why this announcement, Grokipedia, coming out of XAI on September 30th, 2025, well, it sent massive ripples everywhere. Through media, academia, how we even think about knowledge.
Grokipedia. So it's AI-driven open source from XAI. The ambition here is just, it's hard to overstate.
It really is.
So our mission today in this deep dive is to really unpack this. We've gone through a stack of sources analyses of Grokipedia's features, the tech reports, the philosophical debates erupting around truth and bias.
Exactly. And we want to look beyond just the tech specs.
Yeah.
You know, it's about this emerging three-way dynamic. You've got Grokipedia, the new challenger. Then there's Wikipedia, the established giant. Right.
And let's not forget the old guard, Encyclopedia Britannica, the authority model.
So it's AI versus human consensus versus expert curation.
Precisely. And wrapped up in that are these fundamental questions about truth, about bias, who controls information, and who gets access to it in this digital age. This is like an epistemological battleground powered by serious AI. The outcome could genuinely shape what the next generation understands as fact.
Okay, let's start with the why. Because the motivation here seems intensely personal, very public, and deeply ideological. Musk hasn't exactly been subtle about his issues with Wikipedia over the years.
Not subtle at all.
Yeah.
He has this long-standing, very vocal frustration. He doesn't see Wikipedia as this neutral collaborative project. He views it, quite frankly, as a political instrument.
Captured by certain groups, is the claim.
That's the core of his critique. And he uses really charged language, publicly calling it Wokipedia.
Right, I remember that.
And even more pointedly, Dikipedia.
Mm-hmm.
That level of open contempt for the existing system, well, that's the ideological launchpad for Grokipedia.
That famous or infamous billion-dollar offer, just to get them to change the name to Dikipedia. Even if it was just a taunt, it speaks volumes about his disdain, right? And maybe hints at the resources potentially involved.
It absolutely does. It signals a complete lack of faith in Wikipedia's governance and editorial process. But beyond the name-calling, what's the actual substance of the critique? What's the ideological problem he sees that's so bad it justifies building a whole new encyclopedia?
So the sources say?
The main charge, from Musk and others aligned with him, is systemic bias. They argue Wikipedia isn't a neutral reflection of knowledge, but a platform dominated by, in their terms, left-wing activists or these sort of hidden editorial groups.
Okay.
The accusation is pretty serious, that it acts as a smear machine for the left, that it deliberately censors, twists, or distorts articles, especially on politically sensitive topics, social issues, certain historical interpretations, anything that doesn't fit a specific worldview.
And this isn't just about, like, one badly written article he stumbled upon. It's a criticism of the whole system.
Exactly. It's systemic. They point to what they call Wikipedia's governance problem. The idea is that small groups of influential editors, often anonymous, control the moderation. They see the processes as opaque, difficult to navigate, and incredibly resistant to corrections, especially if those corrections challenge a prevailing narrative.
So if you, say, disagree with how a political figure is portrayed, you hit a wall.
That's the claim. You run into this bureaucratic, almost ideological resistance. And they argue this is a massive flaw, particularly given Wikipedia's huge influence today.
That influence point is key, isn't it? Wikipedia isn't just some website tucked away. It dominates Google search results.
Absolutely dominates. And maybe even more critically, it's been a primary source for training many of the large language models we're seeing now.
Right, so if the training data is flawed,
then the AI learns the flaws. If Wikipedia has this alleged bias baked in, and AI learns from it, then the AI just replicates and scales that bias massively. That's the high-stakes argument. A corrupted knowledge base leads to corrupted AI, poisoning the well for the future.
Which positions Grokipedia in their narrative as more than just an alternative. It's presented as almost a necessary corrective for humanity's future understanding.
That's the framing. It's positioned as an essential step in XAI's grand mission to, quote, understand the universe. If the human knowledge base is riddled with errors, bias, and infighting, Grokipedia is meant to be the fix.
A massive improvement, I think, was the phrase used.
Yes. Using AI's supposed objectivity to create a cleaner, more truthful foundation. That billion-dollar Wikipedia taunt wasn't just about disdain. It highlighted his rejection of the nonprofit community-governed model of Wikimedia
In favor of.
in favor of Grokipedia, which promises algorithmic rigor overseen by XAI to deliver that corrected version of knowledge free from human political squabbles.
Okay, so let's shift from the why to the how. Ideology aside, how does Grokipedia actually plan to build and maintain this supposedly bias-free knowledge base? It's a radical departure from Wikipedia's millions of human volunteers and endless talk pages.
It's a complete paradigm shift. Forget human consensus, forget volunteer editors. The core mechanism here is AI automation. Everything hinges on Grok, XAI's large language model.
Which is trained on, well, presumably a massive data set, including real-time stuff from X.
Exactly. Trained on a huge corpus of web data, but with that unique pipeline from X, giving it access to real-time information flow.
So what's Grok actually doing? It's not just writing articles from scratch, is it? It sounds more like it's auditing the existing knowledge sphere.
That's a good way to put it. It's performing a kind of continuous, large-scale, real-time audit. The process, as described, is pretty complex. First, Grok analyzes existing information from everywhere. Wikipedia itself, academic papers, news reports, government documents, you name it.
Okay, it reads everything. Then what?
Then it tries to differentiate. Using cross-referencing, internal consistency checks, source verification, it attempts to identify what's a verifiable truth, what's only partially true, what's an outright error or maybe an AI hallucination, and crucially, what's missing the omissions.
But how does it tackle bias? That seems incredibly subjective. How does an algorithm detect emotional framing or subtle political spin? That feels like the hardest part.
It's definitely the most ambitious and potentially fragile part of the whole system. The sources suggest the AI is being trained to recognize linguistic patterns associated with advocacy or persuasion rather than neutral description.
Like looking for loaded words?
Exactly. Loaded adjectives, emotive language, appeals to identity, maybe an over-reliance on sources that aren't widely accepted or are known for a particular slant. The AI identifies these patterns and then aims to rewrite or supplement the content to achieve a more neutral, factual tone, stripping out those perceived ideological markers.
So essentially, it's designed to algorithmically enforce a kind of NPOV neutral point of view, but on a scale and speed humans could never achieve.
Right. It aims to replace the messy, often frustrating human edit wars that plague Wikipedia talk pages
Oh, those are legendary.
with supposedly clean, objective, algorithmic inference. The goal is to bypass human contention altogether. Wikipedia's strength is collaboration. Its weakness is that collaboration often breaks down into conflict and gridlock. Grokipedia promises speed and consistency through automation.
But doing this kind of analysis constantly across potentially the entire internet's worth of knowledge, that requires some serious computational muscle, doesn't it? This isn't something you run on a standard server rack.
Not even close. The infrastructure is key to the whole vision. Grokipedia is deeply integrated with the XAI ecosystem, and the reports specifically mention leveraging potentially massive GPU clusters.
Like the Colossus supercomputer they've talked about.
Exactly. The one reportedly being built with, I think the number was 230,000 GPUs.
Wow, 230,000 GPUs. What kind of tasks demand that much power for an encyclopedia? Is it just about speed?
It's about speed, scale, and complexity. Think about it. The AI isn't just generating text once. It's constantly running these cross-referencing loops, verification checks, bias analyses across petabytes of data. Every time a new study comes out or a major event happens,
It has to ripple through the system.
instantly,
Yeah.
the AI needs to reevaluate potentially thousands of related entries to see if the new information changes anything. That level of parallel processing, continuous analysis, and real-time synthesis needs monumental compute power. That's what enables the idea of a living encyclopedia.
Living encyclopedia. So dynamic real-time updates are baked in. A news event breaks on X. A scientific paper is published. Grokipedia could potentially update the relevant entries almost immediately.
That's the ambition, making Wikipedia's multi-day or even multi-week editing and review cycles look ancient by comparison.
Which sounds great for users. But there's another angle here, isn't there, for XAI itself?
Ah, yes, the strategic advantage. This isn't just public service.
Right, it's a data play too.
Absolutely critical. By creating this supposedly truthful, constantly updated AI-curated knowledge base, XAI is simultaneously building an incredibly valuable proprietary data set for itself.
A data set nobody else has.
Exactly. A high-quality, presumably cleaner data set to further train and improve Grok models. This gives XAI a potentially significant competitive advantage over other AI labs training their models on the messy, allegedly biased public web, including the current Wikipedia. It's a powerful feedback loop.
And then there's the user experience element. Grok is known for having a personality.
Yes, the somewhat humorous, occasionally sarcastic conversational style.
How does that fit into an encyclopedia?
The sources suggest users might be able to interact with Grokipedia beyond just looking up facts. You could potentially query it conversationally, ask follow-up questions, maybe request summaries delivered in Grok's distinctive voice.
So it's not just a reference book. It could be more like an interactive tutor or conversational partner.
Potentially. It moves it from a static repository to something more dynamic and engaging, perhaps even a bit entertaining, which could be a key factor in adoption, actually.
Okay, so with Grokipedia joining the fray, we really do have this fascinating triad. 3 fundamentally different models, different philosophies about how knowledge should be gathered, checked, and shared.
It's clear contrast. Scale versus authority versus automation. Each represents a distinct approach with its own built-in pros and cons, largely stemming from how it's governed and operated.
Let's break them down. First, the reigning champ in terms of reach, Wikipedia, the scale model.
Right. Wikipedia, launched back in 2001, its defining feature is its sheer mind-boggling scale. Over 6.7 million articles just in English, available in something like 300+ languages.
Its strength is
Global collaboration. That decentralized volunteer army gives it incredible breadth, covering topics nothing else touches. But as we've discussed, the flip side, its weakness, is that very openness. It's vulnerable to vandalism, persistent biases, those endless draining edit wars.
and crucially, governed by a nonprofit, the Wikimedia Foundation.
Correct. Nonprofit governance. Now, contrast that sharply with the oldest player, Britannica.
The authority model, founded.
Way back.
Yeah.
1768. It represents the complete opposite philosophy.
Yeah.
Expert-driven, tightly controlled, closed editing. Its digital version is much smaller in scale, maybe 65,000 to 120,000 articles, something in that range.
But its strength is perceived reliability.
Exactly. High reliability, rigorous curation, often involving peer review by academics. People trust Britannica for accuracy. The weaknesses, it's much slower to update on new developments, and historically, a lot of its best content is locked behind paywalls. Plus, it's governed by a for-profit company.
Okay, so we have nonprofit scale and for-profit authority. Where does Grokipedia fit? It seems to be trying to cherry pick.
It's definitely aiming for a synthesis, and a very ambitious one. Grokipedia wants the breadth of coverage you see in Wikipedia,
Yeah.
but combined with the rigor and accuracy associated with Britannica.
Yeah.
The huge difference is how it achieves that rigor. Not through slow human expertise, but through high-speed AI automation.
And the access model.
It's promised to be open source and free to access, like Wikipedia. And this is a huge, but the governance is fundamentally different.
Right. It's not a nonprofit foundation. It's centralized under XAI, a for-profit company.
Precisely. And that centralization is a major point of debate.
Yeah.
With Wikipedia, if you disagree, theoretically, you engage with the community, the editors, the talk pages, however messy that is.
It's a human process, flawed as it may be.
Yeah. With Grokipedia, if you disagree with an entry, who do you argue with? An algorithm, the company that programmed it. You're essentially challenging a decision made by a powerful private corporation.
So the concern is that corporate interests, or Musk's own stated political viewpoints, could subtly or overtly shape the truth presented by the AI.
That's the core critique of the governance model. It shifts the locus of control from a distributed, albeit imperfect community to a centralized, opaque corporate entity. We move from community consensus to algorithmic decree.
So we're choosing between decentralized scale, Wikipedia, closed human authority, Britannica, and now centralized automated scale and supposed rigor, Grokipedia. The governance model seems just as important as the technology itself.
It absolutely is. It determines who ultimately holds the power to define knowledge. Do you trust Musk's vision of AI objectivity, even if it's implemented via a private company? Or do you trust the messy, often political, but open process of human consensus? Or the slower, validated expertise of Britannica? There's no easy answer.
This really sets the stage for the deeper philosophical questions, doesn't it? Can any system truly deliver unbiased truth, especially on contentious topics?
Exactly.
Which brings us right to the heart of the matter, the core philosophical challenge. Musk's stated goal for Grokipedia is to eliminate bias. But many of the sources we looked at push back hard on this, arguing that aiming for complete neutrality on complex, contested issues is not only unrealistic, but maybe even unhelpful.
This is the crux of the epistemological debate. It's the paradox of neutrality. For topics steeped in human values, history, politics, culture, think about things like, I don't know, the Israeli-Palestinian conflict, or the legacy of colonialism, or interpretations of religious texts. The very idea of a single, perfectly neutral summary is problematic.
Why problematic? Isn't neutrality the goal of an encyclopedia?
Traditionally, yes. But the argument is that striving for a forced neutrality, especially one generated by an AI trying to average things out or find a non-existent middle ground, can strip away the crucial context, the diverse perspectives, the reasons people disagree. You might end up with something that feels blandly factual but actually obscures the real issues at stake. It might lack the depth needed for, say, informed citizenship.
So if the AI is programmed to identify and remove bias based on certain rules, it's not really removing bias, is it? It's just swapping one kind for another.
That's the core concern. You replace visible, debatable human editorial decisions, flaws, and all with machine-coded bias. This bias is hidden in the algorithms, the training data, the weighting of sources, the definition of controversial language the AI is told to avoid.
And that's much harder to see or challenge.
Much harder. It's buried in code and data weights. If Grok is trained on datasets that underrepresent certain viewpoints, or if its reward function prioritizes a specific kind of source or tone, its output will inherently reflect those choices, even if the article looks neutral on the surface. The truth it presents is shaped by its programming.
Okay, so if perfect neutrality is a potentially flawed goal, what's the alternative proposed by these critiques? What should Grokipedia aim for instead of trying to erase all bias?
The compelling alternative that emerges from the analysis is to embrace pluralism. Instead of striving for a single sanitized truth, the idea is for Grokipedia to explicitly map out the different viewpoints on contentious issues.
How would that work?
Through what's being called a structured spectrum debate format. The AI's strength wouldn't be in making a final judgment, but in synthesizing and presenting the entire landscape of the debate transparently. Show side by side. Here's position A, here's the evidence they use, here's their core argument, here's position B, their evidence, their argument, and so on.
That's a radical shift. The encyclopedia becomes less of an answer key and more of a map of disagreement.
Exactly, a map of the contested territory.
Yeah.
And the sources provide some great examples of how this could function in practice, really leveraging the AI's ability to collate and structure vast amounts of information from different perspectives.
Okay, let's dig into those examples. Take climate change. Wikipedia now largely reflects the scientific consensus, but a spectrum approach would show the whole debate, right?
Precisely. An AI, using this structured spectrum model, could lay out maybe 4 or 5 distinct, well-documented positions, clearly outlining the core claims and the primary evidence cited by each group.
Okay, like what?
1, you'd have the scientific consensus view. This section summarizes findings from major bodies like the IPCC, focusing on data showing human-caused warming, rising sea levels, CO2 concentrations, and arguing for urgent action like carbon neutrality based on climate models.
Standard view, well-sourced.
Yep.
What else?
2, you'd present the skeptics or denialists perspective. This would outline arguments questioning the severity, the primary cause, or the proposed solutions. It would cite evidence they use, like historical climate variability data, example, pointing to past warm periods, critiques of climate model accuracy, or economic arguments against mitigation policies. It frames change more in terms of natural cycles.
Okay, presenting their arguments and evidence fairly, even if it contradicts the consensus.
Yes, fairly and transparently citing their sources. 3rd, you might have market-oriented pragmatists. This group accepts the science, but advocates for different solutions, emphasizing things like carbon pricing, technological innovation, maybe nuclear power or adaptation strategies, arguing against heavy regulation based on economic efficiency models.
Got it. Different solutions, same underlying problem acknowledged.
And 4th, you could detail the climate justice perspective. This view links climate change explicitly to broader issues like global inequality, capitalism, colonialism. Their evidence focuses on disproportionate impacts on vulnerable populations, historical emissions from developed nations, and they advocate for systemic change, reparations, and prioritizing equity alongside emissions reduction.
Wow. Okay, laying it all out like that, you see the same facts being interpreted through completely different lenses, using different supporting data.
Exactly. The AI isn't saying who is right. It's showing you how and why these groups disagree, based on the evidence and values they prioritize.
Let's try another one, a really tough one. Abortion. How would the spectrum work there?
Similarly, the AI would map the core legal, ethical, and sometimes religious fault lines. First, the pro-choice position, centered on bodily autonomy, individual liberty, and citing legal precedents, like Roe v. Wade's history and subsequent cases, and data on the negative health and economic impacts of bans, especially on marginalized groups. Second, the pro-life position, emphasizing the moral status of the fetus, often arguing life begins at conception. This section would cite biological arguments about development, sometimes religious doctrine, and frame abortion as the termination of a human life, using evidence like fetal imagery to support calls for legal protection.
Clear contrast in fundamental rights.
Third, you'd likely see moderate or compromised positions. These often support legality in early stages, but advocate for restrictions later in pregnancy, based on viability, for example, typically with exceptions for health, rape, or incest. Their evidence often includes public opinion polling showing support for such nuanced approaches.
The middle ground, politically speaking.
And fourth, critically, you could include diverse religious and philosophical perspectives. This is where you'd see contrasts like, say, the Catholic Church's firm stance against abortion versus varying interpretations within Islamic law, which might allow it under certain conditions or timeframes, or Jewish perspectives that often prioritize the mother's life. Showing this diversity avoids reducing it to a single religious view.
Right, that adds crucial global context beyond just the typical U.S. political framing. Okay, one more, an economic one. Taxation. Seems dry, but it's deeply ideological, too.
Absolutely. The spectrum approach clarifies the underlying economic theories and goals. First, progressive taxation advocates. They argue for higher taxes on the wealthy and corporations to fund public services and reduce inequality. Their evidence often involves Keynesian economics, data on wealth concentration, and comparisons to social democratic models in Europe.
Redistribution and public investment focus.
Second, flat tax, or libertarian advocates. They push for low, broad-based taxes, arguing this stimulates investment and economic growth based on supply-side theories. They cite evidence on capital flight or the Laffer curve, and often frame high taxes as inefficient and infringing on individual liberty.
Growth and individual liberty focus.
Third, centrist or balanced budget advocates. They often seek a mix, maybe progressive income tax plus consumption taxes focused on fiscal responsibility, closing loopholes, funding essential services efficiently, but avoiding rates seen as hindering economic competitiveness.
Pragmatism and efficiency focus.
And fourth, you might have populist or radical proposals. This could include things like wealth taxes, financial transaction taxes, or calls for global minimum corporate taxes. Their evidence focuses on extreme wealth inequality, corporate tax avoidance, and framing taxation as a tool for social justice and reining in excessive power.
Okay, I see the pattern. It's about laying out the arguments, the evidence cited by each side, and the underlying values or theories. What's the bigger implication of doing this for, say, democracy or public understanding?
The potential impact is huge. In our current media landscape, we're often stuck in echo chambers, only hearing the arguments and evidence that confirm our existing beliefs.
Right, filter bubbles.
Exactly. This structured spectrum approach forces you, the reader, to confront the logic and the evidence used by people you disagree with. It doesn't force you to agree, but it helps you understand why they hold that position. It turns the encyclopedia from a passive source of facts into an active, educational tool for democratic literacy.
It potentially equips people to engage with complexity, rather than just reacting to simplified narratives.
That's the hope. By mapping the disagreements transparently, it could foster a more nuanced public discourse, where people understand the different facets of an issue before jumping to conclusions. It combats polarization by revealing the structure of the debate itself.
Okay, so if Grokipedia can potentially handle contentious political issues by mapping the spectrum instead of forcing neutrality, what about other areas? Like academic and scientific knowledge, this seems like a domain where XAI's resources could be truly transformative, especially tackling things like paywalls.
Absolutely. This is potentially one of the most revolutionary aspects discussed in the sources. They identify this major bottleneck in how academic knowledge flows currently, this textbook and journal divide.
Explain that divide.
Okay, so textbooks are great for providing foundational knowledge, structured learning, think basic physics, chemistry, math. But they inevitably become outdated, sometimes years behind the latest research.
Right, science moves fast.
Exactly. And all the new discoveries, the cutting-edge stuff, that happens in academic journal articles. But journals are fragmented, thousands of them, highly specialized. They're often dense, hard to synthesize. And critically, most of the important ones are locked behind incredibly expensive paywalls.
So the average student or a doctor trying to keep up or just a curious person,
Hmm.
they can't easily access the latest validated knowledge.
Precisely. There's this gap between the stable but dated foundation and the fast-moving but inaccessible frontier. Grokipedia's proposal here is to become a kind of living academic knowledge engine, bridging that gap using AI.
How? What are the steps involved?
The sources outline a three-step approach, leveraging AI's ability to structure information, read continuously, and potentially overcome the economic barrier.
Okay, step one, building the foundation.
Foundational training. For subjects with objective, well-established frameworks, mathematics, physics, chemistry, core biology, engineering principles, the AI would be intensively trained on high-quality, peer-approved, structured textbooks. This builds a reliable, curriculum-level knowledge backbone. Accuracy here is paramount before moving to the frontier.
Makes sense. Get the basics right first. What's step two? Keeping up with new research.
This is where the immense computing power comes in again. Continuous reading of journals. Grokipedia's AI would be designed to ingest and analyze new articles from thousands of key academic journals, think Nature, Science, Cell, The Lancet, JAMA, specialized publications across all fields, essentially in real time as they're published.
And it doesn't just store them, it synthesizes them.
Yes, that's the crucial part. It analyzes the findings, understands their significance, and integrates them into the existing knowledge structure. It identifies how a new discovery confirms, refutes, or modifies the established understanding, linking it back to the foundational concepts.
Okay, that sounds amazing, but the paywalls. How does XAI get access to read thousands of subscription journals constantly? That costs universities and institutions millions, billions collectively.
This is the most audacious and perhaps controversial part, the paywall solution. The proposal, essentially, is that XAI, backed by Musk's resources, could potentially afford to pay for massive institutional-scale subscriptions to virtually all significant academic publishers.
So XAI pays the publishers directly.
That seems to be the idea. XAI licenses the content legally, at scale. Once it has that licensed access, its AI digests and synthesizes the information. Then Grokipedia provides the derived, summarized, synthesized knowledge freely to the end user.
Wow, so the user doesn't hit the paywall because XAI has already paid upstream.
Exactly. XAI effectively becomes the world's largest research library, or maybe the world's AI research librarian. It absorbs the paywalled primary literature, and the public gets access to the distilled, value-added knowledge synthesis for free.
That would fundamentally disrupt the entire academic publishing industry, wouldn't it?
Hugely disruptive. It could potentially crater the subscription model for many journals if researchers and students can get the synthesized essence freely and instantly via Grokipedia. It might force a rapid shift towards open access publishing models.
And what about the impact on actual research and learning, on equity?
The potential positive impact is immense. Imagine a talented high school student in rural India or an independent researcher in Brazil without access to a major university library.
They could have the same access to cutting-edge knowledge as someone at Harvard or Stanford.
Potentially, yes. It could dramatically level the playing field globally. Researchers could spend less time hunting for papers and manually synthesizing literature reviews and more time building on the latest, instantly accessible AI-synthesized findings. It could accelerate discovery.
And you mentioned dynamic textbooks.
Yes. Because the system is constantly updating, the foundational knowledge isn't static anymore. A section on genetics could automatically incorporate the findings from a key CRISPR paper the week it's published. A physics entry could be updated with the latest results from the LHC. The textbook becomes a living document, always current. That's revolutionary for education.
This focus on access is huge. We've talked about bypassing paywalls for academic content, but what about basic language barriers? Wikipedia exists in many languages, but the quality varies wildly.
That's a critical point of inequality right now. The English Wikipedia is vast and relatively deep. But if you look at versions in many other languages, particularly those from the Global South or indigenous languages, they might have only a tiny fraction of the articles, and they're often less detailed or updated.
So billions of people are effectively locked out from accessing the depth of knowledge available in English.
Exactly. It creates a massive global knowledge divide. Grokipedia aims to tackle this head-on, using the translation capabilities inherent in advanced large language models like Grok.
So automatic translation of everything.
The goal appears to be high fidelity, automatic translation and publication of Grokipedia entries into potentially the world's 100 largest languages, maybe even more. And importantly, not just basic machine translation like we see with simple tools today, but nuanced, context-aware translation suitable for complex topics.
Bypassing the need for massive teams of human volunteer translators, which is Wikipedia's bottleneck.
Precisely. An AI can potentially do this at scale and speed humans simply can't match. The impact could be transformative. Imagine a farmer in Southeast Asia getting detailed, up-to-date agricultural science in our local language, or a health worker in Africa accessing the latest medical guidelines translated instantly.
It turns knowledge from an English-centric resource into a truly global inheritance.
That's the vision. Making complex information accessible regardless of the language you speak could unlock incredible human potential worldwide.
And language isn't the only accessibility barrier. The sources also emphasize audio, the audio imperative.
Yes, and this might be just as impactful, maybe even more so in some contexts. Offering full audio versions of entries has two major benefits. First, inclusion. It provides complete access for people with visual impairments.
A huge community often underserved by text-heavy platforms.
Absolutely. Second, it serves populations with low literacy rates or those who come from primarily oral cultures. For billions of people, listening is a more natural or accessible way to receive complex information than reading dense text.
And again, because it's AI-driven, it's not just a simple text-to-speech reading of the article, right?
No, that's where it gets really interesting. The AI enables customization and compression. It's not just reading the whole thing verbatim.
What kind of customization?
Users could potentially request summaries of varying lengths or focuses. For instance, give me a 30-minute audio overview of the main points on quantum computing. Or, summarize the key arguments in the climate change debate in 5 minutes. Or even, read me the history section of this entry, but make it sound like a narrative story.
So the AI dynamically selects, synthesizes, and maybe even reframes the information based on the user's request and time constraints.
Exactly. It could potentially adjust the level of detail, the tone, maybe even the accent or dialect for greater familiarity and comprehension.
You could have a complex scientific paper broken down into a 10-minute explanatory podcast episode delivered while you commute.
That's the kind of personalized knowledge experience being envisioned. It transforms passive reading into an active interaction. You control the format, text, audio, the length, the depth, the frequency. This combination of universal translation and highly customizable audio delivery could make Grokipedia radically more accessible than any existing knowledge platform.
Okay, let's shift focus slightly. Beyond being an encyclopedia or an academic resource, the sources suggest Grokipedia, combined with other XAI elements, could enable something truly novel in media. The creation of a completely personalized newspaper or magazine. They call it the ultimate luxury item.
Yeah, this is fascinating projection. The idea is that AI allows us to move beyond the era of mass media, the one-size-fits-all newspaper, or broadcast into an era of hyper-personalized information curation. Not just recommending articles based on clicks, but actually constructing a unique publication for each individual user.
Why is that considered a luxury?
The luxury is defined as control over information overload and noise. In a world drowning in content, the ultimate privilege is having exactly the information you need and want, perfectly contextualized and formatted, delivered precisely when you want it, with everything irrelevant filtered out.
And how does Grokipedia fit into making this happen? What makes it uniquely suited for this?
The unique positioning comes from merging the capabilities of two key Musk platforms: the speed and real-time data flow of X, with the depth, structure, and verification potential of Grokipedia.
Ah, so X provides the what's happening right now, and Grokipedia provides the what does it mean?
Exactly. Traditional news struggles to provide deep context instantly. Social media is fast, but often shallow, unverified, and chaotic. Grokipedia aims to bridge that gap. The AI could monitor real-time streams from X and other sources, identify significant events or trends,
And then immediately pull in relevant background, history, data, and context from the Grokipedia knowledge base to explain it.
Precisely. It contextualizes the headlines automatically. So instead of just getting an endless, overwhelming feed, the AI could curate and package relevant, verified stories into a coherent issue, tailored specifically to your needs and interests.
Give me an example. How would that work for a specific person?
Okay, imagine a venture capitalist focused on renewable energy in Africa. Their personalized issue wouldn't just be random tech news. It might include real-time updates on specific funding deals happening in Kenya and Nigeria, pulled from exponential feeds, synthesized analysis of recent relevant policy changes in those countries, cross-reference with Grokipedia's policy data, summaries of new academic papers on solar panel efficiency from the academic engine, and maybe a backgrounder on the economic history of a region where a new project is announced.
All compiled automatically into one report or briefing.
Yes, or think of a historian specializing in 19th century Europe. Their issue might surface newly digitized primary sources, summarize recent relevant academic debates from journals, and link current events back to historical precedents, all curated based on their specific research focus.
That sounds less like a newspaper and more like a bespoke intelligence briefing.
It leans that way. The sources really emphasize control as the defining luxury feature. The user dictates everything.
How deep does this customization go?
Extremely deep, based on the descriptions. Content control. You define your areas of interest with high granularity. You could even specify which perspectives from the structured spectrum you want included or excluded on contested topics, though that raises filter bubble concerns. You select the academic fields or specific researchers to track. Format control. Do you want it delivered as a clean PDF, a visually rich magazine-style layout, maybe print on demand, or a fully narrated audio edition? Frequency and length. A quick 5-minute daily update, a comprehensive weekly digest, a deep dive monthly report, hourly alerts on critical developments. You set the cadence and volume, style and tone. Do you prefer a formal academic tone, a more conversational style? Should the audio version use a specific voice or accent?
It really moves the idea of my newspaper from a figure of speech to a literal, tangible, or digital artifact designed entirely around one person's curiosity and needs.
It's presented as the ultimate tool for managing complexity and staying informed efficiently in your specific domain. It's media tailored not just to your interests, but to your cognitive style and workflow. That level of personalization and control is positioned as the ultimate intellectual status symbol in the information age.
Okay, this vision for Grokipedia correcting bias, revolutionizing academic access, creating personalized media, it's incredibly ambitious, almost utopian in some ways. But we need a reality check. Like any massive tech project, especially one from Musk, there are bound to be significant hurdles and skepticism.
Oh, absolutely. The sources we reviewed are clear about the major challenges, and they are substantial. You could group them into maybe 4 main categories of risk and doubt.
What's the first one? Probably the AI itself.
Top of the list, AI risk, specifically hallucinations and inherent bias. Grok, the underlying model, has already shown instances of making things up, getting facts wrong, or exhibiting questionable judgments in its outputs.
Hallucinations, the term for when AI generates confident-sounding falsehoods.
Exactly. If the core engine is prone to confidently fabricating information, how can Grokipedia possibly achieve its mission of being maximally truth-seeking? It risks creating its own layer of AI-generated errors and biases, which might be even harder to detect and correct than human ones, especially if the correction mechanism is also AI-driven. The cure could be worse than the disease.
A huge credibility problem right there. What's the second major challenge?
Corporate centralization and governance. We touched on this before. Shifting the world's knowledge base from a non-profit, community-driven model like Wikipedia to a centralized platform controlled by a single for-profit corporation, XAI, raises massive red flags for critics.
The concern being?
That corporate priorities, shareholder interests, or the specific political leanings of the owner could inevitably influence the content, the algorithms, the definition of truth itself. Who decides what bias gets eliminated? Who audits the algorithm? Without transparency and independent oversight, knowledge becomes a product shaped by private interests, potentially changing direction without public recourse.
Okay, AI, flaws, and corporate control. What's the third? Something very familiar with Musk projects.
Yes, the infamous Musk timelines. Skepticism here is deeply rooted in past experience. Think about the timelines promised for full self-driving Teslas, Starship's operational schedule, or even deploying features on X like micropayments.
Often significant delays or changes in scope.
Right. Grokipedia is an extraordinarily complex undertaking, training these massive AI models, negotiating potentially thousands of academic publishing licenses, building the global infrastructure, refining the bias detection. The ambitious launch date and feature set need to be viewed with considerable caution. Will it launch on time? Will it deliver on all these promises? History suggests delays are probable.
Fair point. And the fourth challenge, even if they build it perfectly on time.
Cultural adoption. This is huge. Wikipedia isn't just a website, it's a 2-decade-old global habit. It has immense brand recognition, user trust, despite its flaws, and deep integration into how people seek information online.
Getting people to switch is hard.
Extremely hard. Why would billions of users abandon the familiar, free, community-run Wikipedia for this new AI-driven, corporate-backed entity, especially given the controversies around Musk and AI trust generally? Building that level of user trust and changing entrenched habits is a monumental marketing and cultural challenge. It took Wikipedia years to become the default.
So when you put it all together, the potential, the philosophy, the tech, but also these significant challenges, what's the final synthesis? What does Grokipedia represent in the grand scheme of things?
I think it represents a crucial, maybe unavoidable, turning point in the debate about knowledge in the digital age. It forces us to confront the fundamental question: how should knowledge be curated and governed? Is the messy, slow, often biased human consensus model of Wikipedia broken beyond repair?
Or is the solution of powerful, centralized, potentially opaque AI automation even riskier?
That's the core tension. Grokipedia, by its very existence and ambition, throws down a gauntlet. It correctly identifies real problems with existing systems: the vulnerability to manipulation, the slow pace, the access barriers. It poses the right questions about digital truth, even if its proposed AI-driven answer is deeply controversial and technically unproven.
So its success or failure isn't just about market share, it's about which model for knowledge we as a society ultimately trust more.
Exactly. And its ultimate success, if it launches and scales, probably won't depend just on the impressive tech or the branding. It will depend on demonstrating genuine trustworthiness, methodological transparency, and ultimately delivering reliable, relevant knowledge better than the alternatives. Engineering truth, whether by humans or AI, turns out to be incredibly difficult.
It really does. Okay, that's a powerful place to pause. But it leaves us, and you, the listener, with a final thought to wrestle with. Let's say Grokipedia does succeed in its goal of transparently mapping the full spectrum of arguments on contested issues, climate, politics, you name it. Could that structured pluralism genuinely elevate global civic discourse and understanding? Or, given the personalization features, will people just inevitably tailor their Grokipedia to show only the viewpoints they already agree with, turning a potential tool for enlightenment into the most sophisticated echo chamber ever built?